Happy 4th of July, everyone. Jim
Happy
Laird here
4th
with
of July,
Dr.
everyone.
Leland Stillman. We hope that you have a wonderful day outside planned today with you and your family and friends. And today we wanted to get on here and talk about
Freedom.
How things have changed.
How things have changed. Things are very different now than they were, aren't they, Jim?
Yes. So this country was founded on, originally the American Revolution was kicked off by a tax. One single tax on tea is what basically spilt the cup and started the whole thing rolling.
Right.
So today, and this is normal, an empire or a republic, and we're not a democracy, by the way, we're a republic. That's a totally different subject. That
of course, republics tend to turn into empires.
Republics tend to turn into empires, yes. Where the Constitution becomes irrelevant, and then they sell it as a democracy. Needless.
That's right. That's right. Nothing is old. Everything is just repeating itself.
Correct. The Roman Empire went through the same thing where everyone had everything they needed. They became very complacent.
Right.
And that's pretty much what's happened. And that's what has allowed what happened over the last, 2 or 3, 4 years to occur. People just are comfortable. So they really don't care.
Right. Right. And this is the natural state of people. Most people are totally happy to just be safe. They don't crave liberty. They don't crave uncertainty. They aren't curious. That's okay. It's how it is. You can't be mad about that. You got to just accept it. But I think, the key thing that I focus on with 4th of July is Independence Day, right? It's a day of independence. And what Jim and I really try to do is set people free and to be independent from everything, or as much as possible. We can't become independent of the biosphere, right? If I launch you out into space, the vacuum will, cause you to explode. There's no way for you to survive in outer space. You're dependent upon the biosphere.
I always will say this randomly, especially like if I'm out on a date.
Get out of here.
I'll just look at the girl and be like, goldfish exploded in space, just out of the blue, and she'll be like, what?
Really?
Yeah, it works pretty good, actually, just to kind of change things up. If things are kind of like really silent and awkward, I'll be like, goldfish explode in space. And
that's really funny.
She'll get this weird look on her face. And they'll be like, I'm like, well, honestly, everything organic matter explodes in space.
Right.
And then hopefully I don't have to get into a big scientific explanation, because that just destroys the total mood of the thing. So
I bet it would.
It did.
On that note, so we're dependent upon air, water, food as inputs to our physical bodies. We're dependent upon a certain range of temperature. We're dependent upon a lot of different factors in our environment, right? And we also are, well, to one degree or another, dependent upon other people, particularly different phases of life, which is why we live in communal societies, where there's at least some shared values, shared ideas of how life should be, et cetera, et cetera. And the thing that's, troubling most of you deep down is the fact that you're dependent upon things that you're not comfortable being dependent upon. There's something that bothers you in a deep, intrinsic way about being dependent upon thyroid hormone, or being dependent upon something like bioidentical hormones, which technically thyroid hormone is or could be a bioidentical hormone depending on what form you're using, right? And I get that. We totally understand this. We really need to pick and choose carefully the things that we're dependent upon. And you have an intrinsic drive to have this autonomy, have this personal agency to pick and choose what you're dependent upon and why. Because you understand at a deep level, subconsciously, as well as consciously, that if you pick the wrong things to be dependent upon,
like
and
your
they
phone,
fall out on you, like the grocery store system, right? We have a giant system to deliver food all over the country that depends upon the power supply and the power grid. It depends upon the oil infrastructure and our ability to convey goods via truck. Not to mention planes, not to mention, I guess, trains, right? So we're dependent upon all these things. And the overarching global governance, the people who run the world and print the money and control the financial system, they create a system day after day, year after year, decade after decade, where people are increasingly dependent upon them. They're dependent upon them for money. They're dependent upon them for food. They're dependent upon them for medical care. And the big lie, the big lie that keeps people in this system is that it's the only way, and they hold all the cards and you don't hold any cards. And if you're not part of their little club and you don't accept their rules, then it's going to be terrible for you. You're going to be poor. You're going to be unhappy. You're going to be ugly. You're going to, get sick and die young. And this is why really reading your history very carefully is very, very important. Like if you go back and you read a book like Dissolving Illusions by Suzanne Humphreys, you're going to read a lot of things that upend your understanding of how certain therapeutics work, about how certain illnesses work. And this is the most dangerous thing to the giant Ponzi scheme that is the modern global, you could call it the military industrial corporate complex that's comprised of everything from the banking industry to the military to our modern work culture and these big crazy corporations and everything in between. Not to mention, did I say the government? The government's in there too. You're muted, Jim.
And also
You're still muted. Why are you muted, Jim? What did you do?
There we go. I don't know what happened. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Okay. Well, also technology, the phone. I mean, how many people, if you're watching, by the way, say hi to us. Let us know you're here.
That's right. Say hello.
Ask a question. Tell
Wish
us
us a happy 4th.
Wish us a happy 4th. Tell us where you're from.
Right.
The phone. Like, how many people do you think today, particularly like 25 and under, 30 and under,
mm-hmm.
if you said to them, if you have to surrender all your rights to us, or like, you got to get this shot, or you got to do this, you got to do that, or else you're not allowed to use the phone anymore.
Well, this is where, yeah, I know where you're going. Finish the thought though.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, how many people do you think would surrender their rights without even?
Right.
I mean, people took a certain thing for a cheeseburger and French fries, right? So
donuts.
How many people would surrender their rights to say use the internet?
Mm-hmm.
I think it would be 90-something%.
And so, right, yeah, I agree. And
Kentucky.
it's interesting when you start to unpack these lies about what we're really dependent upon and what we actually need. Right, our needs are actually very scarce, and so the key is to create communities and create systems and create networks of like-minded people who are not really interested in being dependent upon systems that are inherently unstable. And it's going to be very interesting to see how the vast majority of people cope with, because there's a saying from, I think it's just generally from the insurance industry, but I heard it in the movie Fight Club. On a long enough timeline, everyone's survival drops to zero. And this, can be extrapolated from people to organizations, institutions, et cetera. What we know and what is inevitable is that everything falls apart, right? So everything that we depend upon is eventually going to somehow transform into something new or end completely, right? And you have to be prepared for that. Like many of the baby boomers are not prepared for Social Security or Medicare or if they're on Medicaid, which is sort of the same thing as Medicare, to run out or to not be able to cover their medical problems, or for the doctors who are in scarce supply and don't really want to work for Medicare and Medicaid because they're some of the most evil institutions in the country for reasons that I can't talk about right now because it would take too long.
And
they're not
get shut down. And they probably get shut down.
I don't know about that. We would see. But the point is, they're not prepared to have medical care unavailable. And a lot of people saw this over the last 3 or 4 years. They saw, wow, I can't count on the medical system. No, you can't. It was a lie to begin with that you could count on it. It was only a matter of time until what was essentially planned obsolescence came to fruition, and people were left with no option but to create their own, forge really their own path with regards to their medical care. And that's why, I don't deal with insurance companies. I don't deal with Medicare. I don't deal with Medicaid. That way we get to actually define what your care is going to be. And we're totally independent from the system, which I can't tell you how freeing that is as a doctor. And I see it as being very freeing for my patients. And then my goal is obviously to help my patients be as independent from any kind of external input as possible. Or even trying to minimize the number of supplements that they need in order to do well, because there's nothing that comes in a box, a bottle, or a bag that we can't find in nature. It's one of my big problems with a lot of particularly MLMs in the natural health space. Most MLMs have no intrinsic value that is not present in nature in an abundance. For example, there's an MLM that's brought to mind that's based on like seeds. The seeds are processed in some way and they come in these very convenient packets and they get shipped to you in a box. And I just look at this product and I think I can buy the seed wholesale for a lot less money than this packaged product that then is going to create a lot of waste that goes into some landfill that eventually we're going to have to like dig up and get rid of, because Lord knows we don't want to have a world that's basically full of trash.
Well, it's convenience, Dr. Stillman. That's how you make millions of dollars. You package things for people.
Well, that's the thing I was actually going to say. I'm glad you brought it back to that. People will give up their rights because they feel enslaved. They feel like they have to do something. They feel compelled.
Complacent, compliant consumer.
Right. But they feel compelled to do something in order to get their needs met. And this comes back to the roots of the word addiction. Addictus is somebody who was a debt slave in the Roman Empire. Because if you went into debt to somebody and you couldn't pay it back, you had to then labor in order to pay off the debt. And that's the idea of debt slavery, which is essentially what the modern American consumer has been saddled with by a series of contractual obligations to which they are not truly a party by their government. They're grossly unconstitutional and violate, common law and the things that, really, every kind of general notion of good governance and also sound money and sound finance. And so we have to create a mind and a body that is free of addictions. That has to actually be our number one goal, because when we do that, we have autonomy. And this is why you and I talk so much about stress, about mindset, about resiliency. We try and connect people to the things in nature that naturally create a healthy, strong mind, that naturally create a healthy, strong body. We try to teach them about nature so they understand what foods to eat and how to prepare them and why, and what things to avoid in our modern world that is poisoning the mind and making it more prone to addiction. There was a really, really interesting case in my residency program that I saw of a gentleman who he had a long history of alcohol use. He had been, unfortunately, been hit many times in the head, lots of head trauma. He'd even been hit by a train, believe it or not. I think he was out, intoxicated and wasn't aware of his surroundings. He got hit. It was a train or a bus or a car. He'd really been hit. He'd been hit so badly and traumatized so badly, he couldn't make eye contact for more than a split second. And this guy would do anything for drugs and anything for a high, things I won't even repeat here and will leave to your, I'm sure, very powerful imaginations. But the point was that he was addicted to things that distracted him from his pain. He couldn't give them up, and he couldn't function well in society. He basically was, we don't have asylums anymore. And that's a whole other story, whether or not closing asylums was a good idea, because it's a very complex, nuanced question. And there was a lot of horrible, awful things done in asylums that should never have happened. But ultimately, that goes back to the point, is that we have to focus in our lives on creating healthy, strong minds and bodies that are independent as much as possible of others and able to operate and be resilient in a world with limited external inputs, limited food, limited water, limited shelter. All of these things help a people to be resilient. And everyone trying to move you away from that paradigm of resiliency and independence and preparedness and strength, those people are trying to make you dependent upon them. And they're doing it through a variety of different manipulative tactics, because if they addict you to something, you become a perpetual customer. And that is an incredibly powerful business model. You know, when I look at how you make a lot of money, and this is one of the very difficult things for me to grapple with as I started and built up my own practice, is that people were coming to me asking me for things that I didn't think they needed. They were coming to me and saying, hey, can we do this test and that test? And I said, well, look, hang on. Before we do that test, why don't we do this or that or the other thing that may make the test different, or that may change your health so that you don't have the problem that makes you think you need the test. Taking people from a state of addiction, a state of dependency, to a state of freedom and resiliency and independence. A lot of people don't want that. And those people are stuck in this mindset of being slaves to their addictions and slaves to their pleasures. And if you look at fortunes, right, who are the richest people in the world? You look at how they've made their money, and I'm not, I don't mean this in like a moralizing way. I'm not trying to say that these are necessarily evil people, but oftentimes the business model revolves around allowing people to do what's bad for them and spend money on things that are not really helping them in a meaningful way, things that are status symbols, things that are superficial pleasures, things that are fleeting pleasures, rather than things that are going to create a healthy, vibrant, beautiful world for everyone to live in.
Well, a lot of that comes down to people just don't want to take individual responsibility for themselves, right?
Sure.
It's so much more convenient just to, order off Uber Eats or, play video games or numb yourself, right? Let them eat cake, so to speak. And the way I look at
that's a really interesting phrase to bring up, though, right? Because that's the statement of the out of touch. And for those of you who don't know, those were like Marie Antoinette's words when they rioted in Paris over the lack of bread, right before she was then beheaded by the Parisian mob. Mm-hmm. But that's the statement of the out of touch elite, of whom we have an absolutely astonishing number in today's society. People who don't understand the priorities of regular Americans and are saying, well, why don't you guys just go out and get a job? Or why don't you just go out and, do this? Or why don't you just get on the government assistance that's there to catch you when you don't have healthcare or can't afford insurance or can't afford out-of-pocket medical care, right? But I think the phrase that is better to what the point you're trying to make is actually the Roman poet Juvenal, who said, give them bread and circuses and they will never rebel.
Yes, circuses. Then that would be sports.
Sports in our modern world. But it's not just sports. Today, if you look at what's entertaining and distracting the people from the crimes that are being committed against them, and the gradual, although it's getting rather rapid, degradation and destruction of their lives and their property, it's anything that's truly meaninglessly and mindlessly entertaining. It's pornography, it's sports, it's television, it's all these things. This is one reason why Jim and I don't own a television. Between the two of us,
there's enough entertainment here. We don't need any more between Rommel chasing.
Well, but that's one of the things we try to communicate to people. We're like, have you gone out and played fetch with a dog recently? It's just a simple pleasure of life. All you have to do is feed that dog every single day. It costs more than a television, but it's a whole lot more spiritually rewarding.
That's very true. Well, what you gain in your health from being outside and all the rest of that stuff. I compare what's going on today to like being in a boat in the ocean, right? And what sinks a boat? The only thing that sinks a boat is when the water gets in the boat, right? So you're in the boat, you're looking around, okay, you're making sure that you're taking care of your boat, you're doing the maintenance on it, on the engines and all those things to make sure the water doesn't get in the boat. Because if the water gets in the boat, you're screwed, right? And that's essentially why we created our Fundamentals of Wellness course, was to help people maintain their boat, because they're in this giant ocean. And I got news for you. I think if you think that things are not going to go back the other direction in the very near future, as far as some of the things we've been through already, you have lost your mind. And so kudos to you if you survived and opted out of one of the biggest mind control psyops in human history, unparalleled to anyone else. done on
And
a
if you woke
mass-
up a little late, but are now realizing what happened,
correct.
much
Because
love to you.
this next time around is going to make this look like playtime, right? So you're going to have to be very secure in your boat to make sure that the water doesn't come crashing in.
And this is really important for people to understand, because you're kind of talking around it, but we all know what you're talking about.
Correct.
Which is that things are bad. Things are on track to get worse. And the number one thing that happens when we tell people this is they tend to spin out and freak out. And the number one thing that I see you doing consistently every single time they do that is to get them to focus on the things they can control.
Correct.
And fix and adjust those things one at a time so that they're prepared for anything that may happen. And you can't be prepared for everything because there's bigger forces in this world than you. But freaking out about that when you're not prepared for day-to-day problems like power outages or, storm damage to a home, which can happen even if your home is properly built. You have to take care of your house. You have to get your life raft in order. You have to put your own oxygen mask on first. You often say that.
I do. And I've spent a lot of time around special forces, high level special forces people. And they would always say, prepare for the worst, hope for the best.
Right.
And so the key is not to be overwhelmed with the ocean. The key is to take care of your own boat and make sure your boat can handle the waves.
Right.
You can make the choices that you need to make for yourself and your family. And you can have the resiliency to prepare to resist and fight the storm. So when things get rough, you don't surrender to the ocean, because peer pressure is an incredible tool.
And that's the thing about how a boat actually sinks, is it's not just the water. It's as the boat gradually drifts lower and lower and lower as water fills the boat, eventually a bigger wave than normal will come up and swamp the boat, and then the boat really sinks. And that means that you've got to make it a daily series of habits to get the water out of the boat. And
it's constant, every day, nonstop for the rest of your life. That's just what you do. It's, taking care of the maintenance on yourself. And that's one of the things we do, is we help people come up with these habits so that it's not, you're not like, you don't have a goal. Your goal is to just keep going. And the process is taking care of yourself. Right. So you're constantly going outside. You're constantly eating a protein every meal. You're constantly walking outside every day. All these things are done to maintain your boat, maintain your mental health, maintain your physical health, so that you can take care of yourself when things go sideways.
And people underestimate the power of engaging with Gemini in a program like the Fundamentals of Wellness, which is why we created it. Because as I was saying before, many of them come to me and they're more fascinated by the labs. They're more fascinated by ensured that they need something like a physical. All of these labs, physicals, whatever, they have value. But the real value is delivered when we have time to help you understand how it applies to your context. And with group coaching, Jim and I are able to help people understand their context better, while also understanding, with the course that we created, the Fundamentals of Wellness, understanding how they fit in the grand scheme of things in general, the generally applied or generally important wisdom that they all need to understand and embrace in order to be healthy and be resilient. And then group coaching, people just don't realize, if you're on a call with us where there's only 5 other people, and that's very common. I don't think our average call is probably 5 to 10 people max. You get time to talk to us, and you get time to steer the conversation. And we do our best to try and keep our responses to individuals short, and also make our responses applicable to everyone. And that's the whole reason why we pivoted into group coaching, because one-on-ones, we were saying the same thing over and over and over and over again. And we've consistently gotten feedback from people that the value to these group coaching sessions with us was actually hearing us process someone else's problem. Because the real thing we're trying to teach you is actually problem-solving skills. Problem-solving skills based on principles, information, and tenets of health and well-being, that are loaded into the course.
And self-awareness too. I've had people that were like,
skill in and of itself.
yeah, I heard you talking to so-and-so about this, and I realized, oh crap, I do the same thing. Like that's something I need to take care of myself. And, even with Dr. Stillman and myself, we are both constantly working on improving ourselves, setting up boundaries for like internet timers, both
Tell
of
them
us
about
are
timer.
Yeah. So we, unplugging the Wi-Fi, both Dr. Stillman and I in a different way could be obsessive about work in different ways. Right. And so we kind of get in a pattern where it's like, well, I'm going to do one more email, or I'm going to optimize one more YouTube video.
Yeah. I particularly have a pattern I have a very ADHD brain. I just had my QEEG done out of half curiosity, and partly I'm sure I knew I needed help, and it's because of all the ugly stuff I saw in my training that I didn't resolve or didn't process properly, which is a whole other story. But on my QEEG, the woman interpreting it said, look, you have a classic ADHD brain. You'll do much better on ADHD medications. I don't really want medications. I want to do a combination of neurofeedback and EMDR so that the areas of my brain that are hypofunctional become normally functional, which is what I'm doing now. I just had my first neurofeedback session yesterday, and it was amazing. I won't say life-changing because I don't know.
It takes time.
It does take time, right? But the point with the ADHD brain is that I have a tendency to work best under pressure. Like my best work, and I work fastest on creating PowerPoints, presentations, papers, blog posts when I have to get it done within the next 20 minutes.
Leave it to the last minute. And I'm like that in a lot of ways too.
And so I know that I'm going to go to bed around 10 o'clock. So at around 9:40, I know that if I crush emails for 20 minutes, I can get a lot done because my brain goes into, okay, well, we got to go to sleep. So now we have to get through the emails. This created a really unhealthy pattern in my evening routine that I would tell patients and clients not to do. Don't use technology in the 3 hours before bed. Now, the reality is because I'm self-employed, I can take, an hour-long break in the middle of the day to go walk on the beach. And so when people who I'm emailing will say, what are you doing emailing me at 10 o'clock at night? Shouldn't you be going to bed? I'm like, yeah, but I took an hour-long walk on the beach this morning because I'm self-employed and I can do that, right? But it still didn't make doing emails at 9:30 at night good. So anyway, I'll let Jim finish the story about the timer. But that was what I fell into because of how my brain is. And this is the kind of processing we help people with. Here's your problem. You're doing emails at 9:30 at night when you shouldn't be. And let's find a solution. So what was the solution, Jim?
Plug the timer in and it goes off at what, 9?
Well, it's a timer. It's like a garden timer or electrical timer. And so it comes on at 8:30 in the morning and it shuts off at 9:30 at night. And I can't tell you how good I felt last night when the timer went off. I was actually in the middle of a Zoom call with Cameron, our health coach down in Australia. And I thought his internet must have glitched out, but it turned out that my internet had just turned off. And I felt great. I felt liberated. I thought, oh, I can't work anymore right now. I have to get ready for bed. And that's exactly what I did.
Yep. Well, people too, like the reason we're good at helping people with this stuff is because we struggle with it ourselves.
And we are in many respects our own worst.
We've come to the conclusion, like I've destroyed my health in a million different ways from Sunday. And, I know what I had to do to dig myself out of that. And I know the work that has to be done to keep me from being sucked back into that, spiral, black hole, whatever you want to call it. Like it doesn't end. Like you don't regain your health and then it's parties and rainbows and everything else. It's a daily grind of getting your essentials, getting your fundamentals,
right.
Making sure that you don't let bad habits creep back into your life. That's a big reason why, we're both doing some neurofeedback and some things like that to help our brains not get stuck in a certain pattern.
And this gets into what I was saying before about independence, because, the big trend we see in the health and wellness and fitness industry is that people create business models where the client or patient is constantly coming back for more. Like if you take, I saw a billboard the other day for a vein and cosmetic surgery center. And what's their business model? Okay, woman notices varicose veins. Woman Google searches treatments for varicose veins. Woman finds vein stripping procedure. Women searches, and it's almost always women. Men don't care about their varicose veins, and we don't get them as bad as women do. Sorry, that's just how it is. Woman Google searches for vein stripping procedure on Google Maps, finds doctor, books appointment, books procedure, goes to the OR, has it done, or has it done in the office if it's a minor procedure, comes home, cosmetic, result delivered, right? That's a great business model because she's going to have more veins and she's going to go back to the same place for the same procedure next year and the year after and the year after and the year after until she runs out of money or they literally can't do any more surgery.
Or they run out of veins.
They run out of veins or they die, which is eventually what everybody does, right? But a better solution to this problem is for you to build healthy diet and lifestyle choices now and understand what's going to cause the problem in the future. And that's why an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And that's one problem that I have with how people look at what we do. Like I had somebody once email me and say, why are you charging money for a premium subscription on your Substack? A lot of people are providing this information for free. Free information is an illusion. Free information is all ultimately monetized by something that someone is selling you. And that doesn't mean it's bad. It doesn't mean it's wrong. It doesn't mean you don't need that thing. But the most valuable information you're ever going to get, you pay for. And you pay for it because it's been curated so that it will actually save you money and not turn you into a perpetual client or customer. Now, do all my patients and clients eventually get sick and have problems and need my help? Yes, because your body naturally decays. This is the simple part of life. But it doesn't mean that we can't help you be more resilient and need less of me and as little as me as possible as possible. And that's the whole goal of what Jim and I do.
Well, it's like my gym. My goal wasn't to create dependency on me.
Yeah.
I wanted to teach people to learn so they could train themselves. But
right.
most of them chose to come to me because I simplified it for them. I made it easy for them. They didn't have to think about what they were doing, and they trusted me and they enjoyed the community. And that's a big part of it as well, is being around a community where you can say, man, things are really nuts right now, and everyone else goes, yeah, they are. It's pretty crazy, isn't it? To have like-minded people that are, and that doesn't mean you agree with everything that they have to say, but at least you're able to have a conversation and not be inflammatory about it, So it's a lot of people are really lonely on an island right now because they feel like no one else sees what they're seeing. And
I think it's very important for people to reach out and build community locally and find like-minded people. They're around and they're all craving that connection the way that you are. And they're all looking for it in many of the same places you are. It's come to think of it, Jim, we should probably find a way to help people connect with more like-minded people on the ground. But
we will. We'll figure something out. Either a Facebook group or something on Kajabi or something.
Yeah, I think that's enough.
We
for
have
today.
options.
Don't you?
It is. That was really good. You know what? Anytime you can bring Fight Club into things, that's phenomenal. I mean, we went from philosophers to empresses to Fight Club. That's fantastic.
Empresses? No, she was a queen, but close enough.
Okay, same thing,
same difference.
I mean, it is the same thing.
Happy 4th, happy Independence Day, everybody. Go out there and build some resiliency and some independence.
Please like and share.
We love being liked and shared, especially because the algorithm hates us because we're free-thinking people who will tell you what you're not supposed to know.
That's correct. And I'm too